All spoiler recap. 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 All spoiler recap.
Welcome back to the All Spoiler Recap. I'm Julia Cunningham. Over the course of seemingly an hour plus, unknown amount of time, I go through a movie beat by beat, whether it's a horror film deemed too scary or a Christmas movie that just needs to be told. We go through a beautiful film. I'm Julia Cunningham. My guest, Emily Higgins from the Tasteless Podcast, returning to the All Spoiler Recap. Emily, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, because I get the most positive comments from people that are like, I love All Spoiler Recap too. And I'm like, thank you. I feel like that's also my show. I feel ownership over that as well because I love it so much.
Oh my God, no. And I love Tasteless Podcast. And also when there's a pop-up interview series, which every once in a while pops off as well. Most recently with Jennifer Esposito, which I went and listened to because I love her movie.
Can I tell you, I just got the email from Film Independent about that they're doing a FYC screening of Fresh Kills in LA. And I'm like so upset that I'm not there. I'm so upset.
I might have to go and support because if you have not seen this, like Jennifer Esposito, she wrote, she directed, she stars in it. It's like the female perspective of like being a mob wife. And I ended up watching it on a plane randomly because I know you'd been talking about it so much. And I kept thinking, oh, I need to rent it. And then when I was flying, I was like, oh my God. And I loved it. Shout out to Jennifer Esposito.
Yeah, that is like the movie of the year, followed by probably The Substance.
Oh, absolutely. Which, by the way, people have been asking me to do an all-spoiler recap of The Substance because a lot of people can't deal with body horror / needles. And I've been telling people, if you can't handle a needle, you're not going to be able to handle The Substance. If you remember the scene with Jared Leto doing heroin in Requiem for a Dream and how disgusting it was, times that to 1,000,000 in The Substance. It's intense.
Old like Chicken Bones is Requiem for a Dream style too. Like Ellen Burstyn is very well represented in The Substance.
Absolutely. But I've been telling people I saw it in theaters, but there's so much detail that I have to be able to rent it or stream it so I can really pause and write stuff down because this is one I don't want to do a janky recap of. But now it is available on demand. So I will be getting to that because it's a long movie too, so I've got to it's going to take me at least an entire week to prep.
That's going to be a good one though.
It's going to be a 4-hour-long episode of The Substance.
Longer than the movie because you're just instead of just watching the needles, you're trying to explain just how disgusting and blackened.
And it's so visual, so but look, I know that you've been clamoring for The Substance, so don't worry, it is coming. But you know what movie I wanted to capture? And Emily Higgins, who's a good friend of mine, and we like to talk movies, and I love, again, go check out Tasteless Podcast because it's brilliant. But I was like, you know what? What movie am I going to do this week? People were really excited that I had done a Christmas movie recently, and there was a lot of requests for something in the top 10 on Netflix currently called like Hot Frosty, where it's like a hot snowman.
Oh, you have to do that one. I haven't watched it yet, but if you have to do it.
Yes, I'm definitely like, okay, I will tackle. And yet this week, John Krasinski was named Sexiest Man Alive, according to People magazine. We could have had our first queer cover with Jonathan Bailey for Wicked, also perfectly timed. I get that there's probably energy of like no one knows who Jonathan Bailey is in a certain way. It's like People magazine is such a broad spectrum. He was right there, but John Krasinski.
I need a list. I need to know who decides on people because it must be like a quorum of like 10 people, 10 women that get together. Like I need to know that. Yeah.
Who's the hottest? Well, that's the one nice thing is on the Jess Cagle Show via SiriusXM where I act as co-host. Former, editorial director of People and EW, editor-in-chief, who gave us some interesting insight. It's a lot of like market testing and also, guys, by the way, who plays ball? Because back in the day, they would just choose. They'd be like, John F. Kennedy Jr. is the sexiest man alive. And there was no participation. And then after a while, they were like, no, we need them to like want to be involved, play the game, do a photo shoot, go and promote it. So, like John Krasinski goes on Stephen Colbert. But a lot of people don't want to do that. So he's like, you'd be surprised, like, the workings of it. And the market that you want it to sell, it's their biggest issue.
Am I allowed to say on the show, like, Does John Krasinski sell a magazine?
I'm wondering. Well, I do feel like he is just like mass appeal. You know what I mean? He's just like that white guy that everyone knows in a way, mainly because of The Office. And I don't knock it. I love the Emily Blunt factor of it. But you know how I feel about A Quiet Place. So it's a knock against him.
I'm so excited for today's film because I'm a hater of so many things. And some of them are in this film.
I know. There's so many things to talk about with a movie called If. That's right. The big writer, producer, director, sexiest man alive, John Krasinski, his beautiful, quote, children's, end quote, film that was released earlier this year and, sits at a beautiful, surprisingly high. I thought it was going to be in the 30% range, 50% on Rotten Tomatoes.
It's offensive. I feel like whenever I go look up a beloved rom-com, Miss Congeniality or whatever, it's like 24%.
I know. First Wives Club has like 3% on Rotten Tomatoes or something in Unhinged.
Practical Magic is definitely rotten on
for
there.
Sure.
And if people are... Ugh.
Here's what's going to make you more mad. The popcorn meter is 87%.
What are these people don't have taste?
I know. Also, what I do love is that Mandy Moore does the choreography because I was like, oh my God, Mandy Moore. And then I was like, oh, other Mandy Moore.
Oscar winning or just nominated award winning choreographer Mandy Moore.
Choreographer. Yeah, exactly. Other Mandy Moore. So, and this like wild cast because, and we'll go through it as we get to them, but all of the various ifs as in imaginary friends are voiced by people like George Clooney and Matt Damon, and so we'll sort of like dig in on that. But let's go ahead and start. The movie begins, Emily, with our Paramount logo, but it's a drawing of the Paramount logo, and we start right away. What is clearly a camcorder sort of home video hazy shot of feet. Oh, John Krasinski, no. The first beat is feet? No, blurry feet, hazy home video feet. The camera becomes the point of view of maybe seemingly a child, so the camcorder pulls up, and we're seeing this wallpaper of cherry blossoms over stripes and a little dresser with a Ferris wheel, and beyond the door is a mirror showing actually a young woman holding the camcorder while she continues down the hallway, unveiling a much larger living room and a little girl on the far side playing. And it's like, giant couch, chairs, and like a little almost coffee table right in almost like the banquette where it like clearly overlooks a cityscape. So beautiful townhome type situation.
They're wealthy.
Exactly. There's definitely wealth. The camera violently zooms in on the little girl drawing while we start to get our credits. And it's a violent zoom in where it's supposed to be like, oh, like amateur mom just filming around the house. But also, what is this, Cloverfield? Why is it so violent, that zoom in? And we start getting a white, bold Arial font, which is just the perfect description for Sexiest Man Alive, John Krasinski. Just a white, bold Arial font. And in walks Sexiest Man Alive, John Krasinski, holding a tray that includes a white teapot and teacups and the sugar cup. And he's walking in going, hot, 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 hot. Even though I'm like, you're carrying the tray. Is the tray scalding hot? Like, were you trying to let everyone know, like coming through in the kitchen? And even though he's screaming that it's scalding hot, the family is around the small table and the little girl is wearing a unicorn headband. And, age 8, 12, 19, unknown age of this youth. And John Krasinski throws an Oreo into the mom's tea, splashing it. You're scalding hot tea, and you're putting an Oreo in the tea? What's happening in this family?
Oh, this sounds very AI.
John and his daughter are laughing and laughing as they're spilling scalding hot tea onto their mom. Like full head thrown back, like ha, 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 getting like as much air in to laugh as they're dunking their Oreos into tea. And we start seeing this little girl, and she's painting and she's playing and seemingly a very fun mom, a very fun dad, that it's a very loving household. This household is brimming with love. I can't take the amount of love that's in this room is sort of the energy. And we start getting this voiceover from the little girl. And it says, I remember my mom asked me to tell her a story, and I never knew why. Maybe it was just something to make her smile, to take her away from all of it. And as she's giving this voiceover, we're getting this montage of like playing. And again, like the credits are coming in our white, bold Arial font. And we're seeing like her playing like pretend airplane. And she's like a princess in one moment. And they're playing the piano together. And they're going trick-or-treating in a store-bought witch costume. And I only say that. The parents are dragons in like giant onesie dragons. She's a store-bought witch. And I'm like, you just showed us a sequence of her being creative and painting and a homemade airplane. And her room is like, quote, frozen with like paper-made snowflakes everywhere. And then you get a store-bought witch costume?
Also, is the mom dying?
Clearly dying.
Okay, that's and the fact that I got that from your description of this brimming with love household proves how important this podcast is and your storytelling abilities. I'm like, oh, that mom's gonna be dead.
That mom's dead. She's dead. So then the voiceover continues. It wasn't until much later that I realized that these stories she wanted me to tell had nothing to do with her at all. And again, after trick-or-treating, we see John Krasinski with his wife, no name, dancing. They're clearly so deeply in love. And it says, when I realized that the most important stories we have to tell are the ones we tell ourselves. We get more credits. We're getting magic tricks. We're getting painting. We're getting karaoke where she's doing Tina Turner with a little wig on.
Oh.
It's all home videos, whatever. And then we get a scene as, again, like music, we're getting, our credits still, the most amount of credits in white, bold Arial font. No fun font for this, okay? A woman is dying, clearly. We get white, bold Arial font. And then we see her playing in the hospital with the mom in the bed with an IV. And then a headscarf and the mom being in the hospital. And lots of now grandma, played by Fiona Shaw, helping at home. And she's kind of taking on this role and painting and playing with the daughter. And the whole montage ends with Sexiest Man Alive, John Krasinski, and his daughter walking out of seemingly the apartment with suitcases and waving to, I guess, the grandma and closing the door. We get a black screen. It fades to black. If we get our title of the film in a somewhat 3D with purple shading, but the F isn't 3D. So we get the dynamic of the length of the I and then more of a straight on F, but like the tiniest bit of shadow under the top of the F. But the way the lettering is done, it also looks like inlay, as if there's like crown molding around each letter. Is the best way to describe it. And there is a forward shadow of the word if that shows like furry lettering, as if the shadow of if is furry lettering. And there's a small single light just off camera that is above the word if, and yet somehow it's reflecting, so it has a shadow. Like it make like
no physics were taken into consideration.
Exactly. If you are a scientist, if you are an electrician, can you please explain the dynamics of this shadow? Because it doesn't make any sense.
If you are a scientist, you are going to hate the film If.
Literally. Maybe if you're even a philosopher. We'll take a philosopher's take also. Yeah. So anyways, the shadow is also, the letters of if are white, but the medium version of purple is the shadow that's against the dark background. None of it makes sense.
Oh, what?
We fade to black. And again, we see Fiona Shaw, who's the grandmother, who was like, in Killing Eve most recently. But iconic British. I think she's a dame. I think it's Dame Fiona Shaw. I'm sure she's been knighted in some way. My Left Foot. I mean, name a film, she was in it. So she's making her way up in an old school winding staircase and going on and on about parking in the neighborhood. And clearly it's like time has passed. And she tells this little girl how lucky it is that she even got a parking spot. And Fiona Shaw is going on and on and on. And like, do you remember this place? You were so young. Not a lot has changed. They open the door and we're realizing the apartment that we were seeing in those home videos is actually like the grandmother's house. And it's more like, okay, maybe the family was living there for the mom's treatment, I guess. Like seemingly probably wanted to go to the best hospital or be around family, probably her mom while this was going on or whatever. Guess what? Never explained. So don't worry about it. Okay? Why would we have questions about that?
Somebody lives there.
And behind her is the older version of the child that we saw in the montage at the beginning of the movie, still unknown age. She's played by Kaylee Fleming, who I guess was in The Walking Dead. More importantly, played one of Jennifer Garner's daughters in Peppermint.
Okay, now I'm on board.
I'm all in. And Fiona is talking to our sweet little Peppermint, our Kaylee Fleming, whose character in the film is named B. And because she's so random, we're going to call her B just because it's easier. And B hasn't said anything. It's wandering around the living room. And she's wearing these like tiny little plaid patterned pants with like a red striped shirt with a red shirt over it. And they also have suspenders. It's like the whole look is like it's giving 1940s, but modern day, maybe? Like what time is it? We have no idea.
Now, is she like a child that still lives with their parents, or is she now maybe someone who lives on their own? Okay.
Like, remember when I was like, that little girl could be 8 or 19?
Yeah.
She was probably 8. And this girl, I believe, and she says it in just a moment, is 12, but could be like 14, but is 12. You know what I mean? And so Fiona Shaw leads her into a little room, which is basically her room. And she says, I've basically remained it the way it was when you lived here. It's untouched since the summer that Kaylee had lived in the apartment B, as we're calling her. And she tells her, she's like, I saved every single painting that you worked on over that summer. And she pulls up this like really big purple box, like not a shoebox, but larger than that. Something that like maybe a handbag came in. So like a pretty large and like deep purple box that has like 2 flowers painted on it. And she sets it down as if that paper weighs 40 pounds. She's like, all of your paintings. Sets it down. And she takes the lid off and she's looking into it. And I'm like, from the camera angle, the box looks empty. It looks as if it's not even half full. Finally, B speaks. She's like, Grandma, I'm 12. I don't really do that anymore. And Grandma Fiona Shaw, who's like, goddamn dame, don't speak to her that way. It's like, oh, of course. She's like, closes the empty box. Oh my gosh, of course. I'm going to put this all up in here. You don't even have to look at it. And like moves it up into the closet of the room. And in there, we see some of the snowflakes, the paper snowflakes and the crown, quote, little kid stuff.
Right, because now she's 12.
Yeah, I'm like, you're a kid.
That's small.
And also, it's like, I get that it's like, okay, this was like the granddaughter's room, but it feels like a very lived-in room. There's books, there's rainbow art, there's a boombox, there's trophies, there's ribbons. It's like, were you there for the summer or much longer? What? There's no explanation of anything. How long did you live there? How long? Why have you not been back in years, apparently?
Right. Just like, bye, Grandma, forever.
Forever. And Fiona Shaw says, your dad will be expecting you. And she's kind of trailing off as she's talking. And B is just looking around her room. And we cut to B being dropped off at a hospital.
Oh, God.
While Grandma Fiona Shaw is like, let me go park the car. Okay, 12-year-old, go head into that giant hospital, figure it out.
It's hard to navigate a hospital as a 30-something-year-old.
Yes.
I'm scared.
I know. And also, like, you're in there for sad reason. You don't want to have to go in there alone.
No.
So B, alone, enters an elevator with like doctors and is wandering the hallways. And she enters a room because she seemingly just knows where to go. And the room is empty. But on the table is a book and a pair of glasses. The book is Pride and Prejudice with a bookmark that's hand-drawn that says smile. And in that moment, the door kicks open and here's Sexiest Man Alive, John Krasinski. And he goes rushing into the room with an IV, but he's in street clothes. He's in like purplish maroon jeans kind of and like a sweater. And he's huge. John Krasinski's very tall. So he like comes bumbling in with an IV and the IV has a face painted on the slop bag, whatever you call those on IVs. And he has mop hair. Like he cut a mop to make it look like it's a human. And it has the face on it. So it's like he's, quote, dancing with the IV. And he's not paying attention to his daughter, who's clearly sitting there on the bed, but like smiling, being like, lols. And he's literally like pushing the IV away and then pulling it in and spinning it and dancing with the IV.
And are we to believe he's not doing this for her benefit? He just would be doing this if she wasn't here?
Unknown. But I think he knows that she would be there or hoping. I mean, the timing is so bizarre. And she, again, is sitting on the bed, like smiling, like LOL, but also like, you're so embarrassing face. And standing there is his nurse, Liza Colon Zayas, who you might know as Tina from The Bear, plus many other things. Tina from The Bear. She watches while John Krasinski, Sexiest Man Alive, is now full on dancing with the IV. Like at one point for the big finish, he dips the IV, pulls it back up, and Tina from The Bear and his daughter B like clap and applaud. I'm like, don't egg him on.
Don't encourage this man.
And she goes, what are they giving you? This is B asking Sexiest Man Alive, John Krasinski. And he goes, this? And he turns to her and he goes, magic.
Oh, God.
Then he holds the end of the IV to show that it isn't actually attached to his body.
What?
And then they hug. I was like, what's happening?
Did he take that off a patient?
Did he rip it? Did he rip it out of his arm to be like, I'm fine?
I'm going home.
So then Tina from The Bear leaves and is like, do you guys want any food? And he's like, I want a burger. And she was like, absolutely not. And he's like, broccoli, lots of broccoli. So she leaves. Sexiest Man Alive, John Krasinski, turns to B, who's now sitting. And he goes, I'm so sorry I wasn't able to pick you up. And, you know, this was the only time I could rehearse with the IV. And so I couldn't be home. And B's like, Dad, stop. He's like, what? And she's like, you don't have to do this. And he's like, do what? And she goes, treat me like a kid. And he goes, oh. And she goes, sometimes life doesn't always have to be fun. He's like, that's true. Very true. Doesn't stop us from trying, though. And he sits down across from her. You know, you're right. Sometimes life isn't fun. Like coming back here to the hospital. Parenthetical, most likely where your mom died.
Why is this the most upsetting movie of all time? How far are we? 15 minutes in, and
5 minutes in, yeah.
And I'm this is horrible.
And he goes, it reminds us of Mom, doesn't it? It's like, we know.
Yes, we remember where Mom died. Probably because you were messing around with her IV.
Exactly. You unplugged her to dance. Killed her. And he goes, and maybe even makes you worry that this could happen again. But the good news is, I'm not Mom. I'm not sick. I'm just, and then he pulls back his cardigan to show an image of a broken heart on his t-shirt. And he says, I'm just broken. He says, I'm just broken.
What?
They both laugh. And he goes, I can be fixed. He says, it's very simple surgery. I'm going to be fine. And she smiles. Guys, he's in the hospital because of a, quote, broken heart.
Does he actually like need a heart transplant? Like, what's this guy's deal?
Also, why isn't he in like a hospital gown? Why are you still in your clothes, just mucking everything up?
They put a dirty mop head on the IV. Like, he is unsanitizing everything.
So he says, you have to promise me that you will not hang around here, that you'll get out there and you'll have some fun. They look out the window together, and then Sexiest Man Alive, John Krasinski, with his broken heart, says, admit it, one day it's going to make a hell of a story. And she goes, what, living in New York? And he goes, being a kid. And he kisses her on the head.
I'm going to throw up. I'm so angry.
That night, she's at her grandma's, Fiona Shaw, watching TV. Fiona Shaw is dead asleep, nearly comatose. And Bea hears this banging, and she slowly opens the doorknob to her bedroom. And the window is open, and the curtain is fluttering in the wind. And the closet is slightly ajar, and she notices, opening it, exposing all the stuff that we saw, again, at the beginning of the movie, the tea set, the crown, the decorations. And at the very bottom is the camcorder that her mom used to record things with. And she pulls it out and she holds it. She ends up taking off down the stairs. She like leaves the apartment building. Fiona Shaw's passed out asleep. She's 12 years old. She just walks out. And as she's heading down the stairs, we see some sort of like whack Minnie Mouse Felix the cat in the shadows, wearing ballet slippers, peering over the banister and watching her go down the stairs. She walks into a deli and purchases inside a New York City deli a cord to basically connect the camcorder to the TV.
So an ancient cord.
Again, what year is it? And also, it's not good enough to just play on the little monitor that's attached to the camcorder.
Right, it has
to watch it on a big screen. Go get it digitized. So she heads back to the apartment where somewhere in Brooklyn, seemingly. And we again see the whack little Minnie Mouse Felix the cat character, like, chasing her, but like hiding behind a tree. And as she approaches the building, she sees the creature. And it facing us looks more like a bug version of Betty Boop. So like imagine Betty Boop, but like more Minnie Mouse with antennas. Like apparently her character's name, which we'll later learn, is Blossom. And she's supposed to look like a butterfly. You know, like the old hose characters from like the 40s where they basically all look like cows? That's basically what Blossom is. Ugh. And the creature runs inside and Bea follows it because of course she sees it. And while the creature, as we later learned, is named Blossom, we can tell that Blossom, is like talking to a person. And Bea is chasing after it, running up the stairs. And she looks into the opening of the key where, you know, like an old-timey key allows you to see all the way through. Not like a modern keyhole, but an old-timey one.
Right.
And in that moment, an eye appears on the other side, which makes her jump. And we hear a male voice say, "Please go away." And Bea responds, "I was just trying to say hello to your little girl." And the voice says, "No little girl here. Please go away." And she's like, okay. She's like, I moved in downstairs and I don't have anyone to talk to. And in that moment, I'm like, oh, Fiona Shaw's not good enough for you? In that moment, an old woman appears from another apartment and is like, you shouldn't be up here. Go back downstairs. And Bea immediately is like, yes, ma'am. And runs downstairs. She gets back into the apartment. Grandma's still asleep. She grabs the camcorder and she takes one half of the cord and plugs it into it. Okay. The next day, she walks through the corridor of the hospital carrying flowers when a little boy who has a broken leg is in a hospital bed, and his little broken leg is like in a sling being, you know, hung from some contraption. So it's being elevated. And I'm thinking, like, do kids stay overnight for a broken leg? Do you get to have a hospital room for a broken leg? And he yells to her, "Are those for me?" Because she's carrying flowers. And she says, "Oh, they're actually for my dad." And he goes, "No, I know. I was just kidding. Do you want to play chess?" She's like, "No." But they end up talking. She's standing in the doorway. And he's like, oh, I fall a lot. I broke my arm. I broke my leg. And I guess I broke my butt, which is, I guess, why he's in the hospital. And she laughs and he's like, oh, I'm Benjamin. And she's like, oh, my mom, I'm B. And he's like, oh, just like the letter. And she's like, no, my mom used to call me B. We later learn her name is actually Elizabeth, but they all call her B. Why'd they call you B and not E?
Yeah. Also,
how is B a nickname for Elizabeth?
I need to say, I was so curious based on your description. I looked up Blossom. You nailed it. You nailed it in the description. I was like, oh my God, how does Julia recreate this in my mind? I didn't know what she looked like, but that's it. Disgusting.
It's like Betty Boop mixed with Minnie Mouse.
With antennas.
With antennas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Allegedly a butterfly? I'm like, absolutely not. She's a horror.
But you're really painting a picture.
Okay, good. So she basically leaves. He's like, you know where I'll be. Because, of course, as she just mentioned, like, she needs friends. So, yeah, like, go befriend the kid in the hospital. And, you know, she goes to see her actual father. And basically, she just goes to drop off flowers. And he's like, don't tell Tina from the bear. He's like, go have fun. He's like, good luck being a grown-up. She laughs and, oh, yeah, because it's when she gets into the room, John Krasinski's not there, but there's a note that says, make a break for it. Don't tell Dina the bear, because there's a whole run of sheets that he tied together to make it look like he escaped out the window.
Yeah, you know what, man? If I'm cleaning up your hospital, now I got to get all those sheets and now I got to wash them because you put them on the ground. Like, get it together.
And why are you not in a gown? Get your
gown on, take off your pants and lay down.
Yeah, so she's like laughing. She finds him in the cupboard, which, by the way, what are you doing hiding in the cupboard? And she's like, you have to stop, is what she says when he's like, never. She closes the cupboard and runs out of the hospital room. No, she like takes off for the day. That night, she's watching a Tina Turner karaoke moment that she did on the camcorder, and she's watching it and she hears this thump. And she sticks her head out into the hallway and she hears the figure Blossom, our haunted Betty Boop Minnie Mouse antenna character, talking to, quote, the man. And she follows the voices and figures out that they've made their way downstairs into the street. And the street, this is one thing that's like a recurring thing. It's very Bachelor Mansion on night one, where the street is always wet. Like, why is it constantly just drizzling in this version of New York City? And B hides behind a tree as we watch a man climb a fence and fall and climb onto the garage that goes up, and then, you know, it's like a carriage house kind of attached to the building. So he's kind of climbing up to get to a window. And it's not just any man. The reveal is it's Ryan Reynolds.
Just what you want in your mid-tier film.
I know, exactly. And he climbs in through the window of a room full of seemingly like a little girl's room. Crowns, stuffed animals, pink stuff everywhere. And the little girl is asleep in the room.
Oh.
And he stands up after climbing in through the window, and he has these fancy Oxford shoes on. And he's going through like a maze of toys while he keeps whispering, blue, blue. And of course, out pops from the closet this giant purple creature. Purple like Grimace, with like furry hair. Blue is his name, even though he's purple. Lols, get it? And he's voiced by Steve Carell, and he has these giant white teeth. Like, why does he have teeth? Like human teeth.
Like Sonic style?
Exactly. And he's trying to, in the words of Twilight, like trying to imprint on this little girl. He's trying to become her imaginary friend. Like, I don't like these creatures imprinting on humans. It's so Twilight coded.
That's so much scarier than like she invented him, that it's just, no, it's a real guy that existed and just came and waited until you thought about him.
Yes. And also, like, why is adult Ryan Reynolds climbing into this little girl's room? It's so gross.
I miss when it was like a big man, a Vin Diesel, The Rock, or like a Kirstie Alley as a tooth fairy, you know, coming in.
Yes. It just feels odd. And he's like, I heard she cried, and what's going on? She's like, well, she hasn't seen me yet, but I think she was about to. And he's like, and what happened in here? And he's like, I sneezed. He was like, she was putting her creepy doll to bed and I got really close, but then I sneezed. I'm like, why is your imaginary friend sneezing? And why is it like exploding rooms?
Does she have to clean this up or her parents going to be mad at her?
So mad. And we cut to the little girl like waking up and seeing the toys all over the floor. And like some of them active because he, of course, sneezes again. And it's like things that have batteries are all of a sudden working. Like, is the sneeze so powerful that like it wound a toy? How would it do that? So unclear, but Ryan Reynolds is hiding under her bed. So like he would be able to be seen? What is going on?
Ugh.
So he's hiding under the bed and purple Steve Carell is just standing in plain sight. Outside B is watching while Ryan Reynolds and the giant purple creature Steve Carell exit out of the window. They're standing on the street as Blossom, the weird Betty Boop with antennas. And she basically passes out. She's so shook by what she sees. We cut to black. And then it's B waking up to old-timey music playing in an unknown apartment. She's been abducted by adult Ryan Reynolds.
No.
She sits up. There's giant ceilings. It looks like an Anthropologie store, but it was trying to be Restoration Hardware. You know what I mean? It's like got the whimsy of an Anthropologie store, but hard metals. And
not good for children.
She walks her to the desk of photographs when giant purple Steve Carell is like, don't touch his stuff. She immediately like throws everything in the air, arms flailing. She's like Phoebe and French. She falls to the ground. She's like, who are you? She says while we hear Ryan Reynolds out of sight yelling, don't touch my stuff to purple Steve Carell. And she's like, what do you mean? He's like, I'm blue. What do you mean? I'm blue. She's like, but you're purple. He's like, well, yeah, the boy, he was colorblind. She's like, who was? He's like, my kid, remember? She's like, what? And then Blossom, the weird Betty Boop cat antenna figure, is like, Blue, of course she doesn't remember. She thinks you're going to eat her. Apologies about him. He's an adorable train wreck, but still a train wreck.
Oh
B sort of settles down, and Blue helps her up. Blossom offers her tea. She's like, oh, I don't drink tea. And Ryan Reynolds yells from far, what girl doesn't drink tea? And Blossom's like, not helping. And she's like, by the way, I'm Blossom. I'm part Betty Boop, part cat. I have antennas.
Do you know any children that drink tea?
No.
Children don't want that.
No, you play, like you do imaginary tea time, but you don't like actually drink it.
There's water in there or juice.
Exactly. By the way, Blossom's voiced by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, but we'll refer to her still as Blossom. I know.
Oh, boy.
Shocking. I know. She goes, obviously you met Blue, a.k.a. Steve Carell, and have you met, and Ryan Reynolds appears now and is like, oh, we've met before, says Ryan Reynolds, mere human. Meanwhile, he starts dipping his Oreos into the tea and eating them.
Disgusting. Why don't they have hot chocolate?
And it's like, how long has it been? How she hasn't been up there since she was little. And Ryan is wearing, similarly to her, like black and white plaid pants with a white shirt and like, again, thin suspenders. Like, why does he always want to dress like it's the 40s and 50s? I don't get his look. And B is like, what is going on? And he says, you know, that's a perfectly understandable question, given, and then like points to Blue and to Blossom. And Ryan and Blossom start having this like minor squabble with energy of like, kiss.
Oh. Is she his size or child size, Blossom?
Child size. Probably like waist high.
So they should not kiss, but
they shouldn't kiss, but it's like,
but that's the vibe.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge is just so good where you are like, have you guys made out randomly?
Ryan Reynolds also has chemistry with unlikely people. I remember seeing The Woman in Gold and being like, him and Helen Mirren should make out.
Probably have.
I hope.
And then Blue is like poking B because he's like, human. They're like, stop poking her. And he's like, this is just so exciting. B is now reconfused. Like, what's exciting? And Blue says, that you're back. And Ryan's like, enough. as he notices the giant mess on his desk. He's like, what part of don't touch my stuff is hard for you to understand? So Ryan's on his hands and knees cleaning up. And B is like, what do you mean by your kid? And Blue says, oh, that's Jeremy. She's like, oh, were you just at Jeremy's apartment? And he's like, oh, no, that was a potential match. Like, and one that could have been successful if it weren't for pointing over at Ryan Reynolds, who's all upset and storms off. And Blossom is like, I'm sure you have questions. She's like, are there more of you? And Ryan Reynolds is like yelling from afar, say no. And they're like, yes, lots more. Almost every kid has one. She's like, has what? And they're like, a friend, imaginary friend.
Is that what IF stands for?
Imaginary friend. They call them ifs. She's like, if? And he's like, yeah, imaginary friend and if, but also like, what if? Like anything is possible. What if?
But if I'm a kid, it's not. I'm getting stuck with somebody else's colorblind friend.
Exactly. We will get there, Emily.
Okay.
Great point.
I'm so
great
up.
point. So Blossom is like, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Her eyes look like they're going to melt out of her head. And then the ifs explain to B that they're working on a, quote, matchmaking agency to help ifs find new kids. And she's like, new kids? But what happened to your kids? And he's like, he grew up. He doesn't need me anymore. And she's like, he doesn't? That's so sad. Blue's like, more like terrifying. If he doesn't need me, he can't see me. And that's all that's left is going to disappear. And Blossom's like, Blue, happy place. And Blue starts going, coffee and croissants, coffee and croissants, coffee and croissants. Ryan Reynolds reemerges again in his high-waisted pants and suspenders and white t-shirt beard. Like he's out of the goddamn 40s. And he says, B, you should go back upstairs before the witch emerges. And Blue's like, hey, she's just a kid. And Ryan Reynolds is like, well, that is that. The next morning, she wakes up and she like shoots up as if like, was that a dream? What happened? And she heads downstairs and Fiona Shaw's making breakfast. And the breakfast is, of course, like burned. And B's like, it's fine. I'm just going to head out right away. I'm not even hungry.
Where's she got to go? She's 12.
I'm also like, where is your supervision?
What's happening with school?
Shouldn't you be on one of those leashes like at Disney when you see those rambunctious kids on leashes? You're too young to be wandering the city.
Tie it to the doorknob. Yeah.
Yes. So she's back at the hospital and she notices the kid Benjamin is not in his bed and she leaves a flower and puts it in his cup of water. Maybe he needs to drink that water.
Right.
What if there's a medicine in that? She finds Tina from the bear and is like, do you have any food? She's like, I haven't been fed.
Oh my God.
And Tina goes, real food or junk food? And she smiles and she's like, there's a vending machine down the hall. It's like, okay. So she's walking down the hall and she sees Blue, the purple creature, hiding in a room and then like jumps into a giant, like one of those laundry carts that would hold, like linens and stuff. It's the world's largest laundry cart. It's 17 sizes the size of a normal laundry cart so that Blue can hide in it. And this day she's wearing like patterned green shirt with like maroon pants. Again, she's sort of dressed like old-timey. Like, what is her personality? She pushes the giant cart of the dirty scrubs to unveil Blue hiding in it, and she pulls him out of the thing. He's like flailing around. He's giant in the tiny space. And she's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, what are you doing here? Laughing. And she's like, I'm visiting my dad. And Blue goes, oh yeah, your dad has a broken heart. It must be scary. And she's like, what? No, it's not. What are you doing here? And I can't be seen talking to you. I'll look crazy. And he goes, oh, come on. You're just a kid. It's fine. And in that moment, she hears, who are you talking to? She somehow has ended up in front of Benjamin's room. It's like, how is it that Benjamin, a child with a broken leg, is in the same floor and down 2 rooms from John Krasinski, Sexiest Man Alive, who's about to undergo heart surgery?
Because he also has a broken butt.
He's got a broken butt. It's so dumb. And of course, she's like, I'm not talking to anyone. Later, they're back in the apartment and she's banging on Ryan Reynolds' door. And she's like, I have your thing. And she's like, what are you anyways? He's like, an if. She's like, I know that, but like, what are you? He's like, I don't know, he says, smiling.
Ugh.
And Ryan Reynolds opens the door and she's like, make it stop. He's like, that's not how it works. And they're arguing back and forth. And finally, Blue says, you could help us. It's like, all of what? She's like, don't say it. Don't say ifs. And he's like, like holding in because he won't say ifs. And Ryan's like, you have to let him say ifs, otherwise his head's going to explode. And she's like, fine. And he goes, ifs. Guys, the comedy in this.
I need a remake of this film where you do every voice in it.
Oh, God. So then Blossom's like, we want to be with our kids, but our kids have forgotten us, so we need new ones, and you can help us find them. So she's like, so I help you place them with new kids, and that's it? Like, everything goes back to normal? And Ryan Reynolds says, careful what you wish for. And it's like, Ryan, do you hate this or not? We can't get the vibe from you. Like, what is it?
Were you enlisted into this job? Is this servitude? Did you apply?
Yeah, like, what is going on? So on his desk is a book called Memory Lane Retirement Community. And it's pictures of all the ifs and their friends. And it's like, she says, I want to meet them. And Ryan's like, who? And she's like, the ifs. He's like, it's impossible. And he can't be seen to take her, to help her and all this stuff. And she's like, where? Take me. And she tells him he needs help and she can help him. And he's like, how? And she goes, because I'm a kid. And he goes, well, that's that, he says. So they jump on the subway and she asks him, how long have you been able to see them? And he says, as long as he can remember. She's like, where do they live? He says, normally wherever kids are or have been. I'm like, why is this so creepy?
It's so
wherever
creepy.
Kids...
And now he's on the subway with her. Her grandma doesn't know where she
Subway.
is.
Like, where are you taking her? She's like, is it magical? And he goes, where we're going, it used to be. They end up in Coney Island, where ifs live.
What?
She says. She's like, ifs live here? And he's like, I hope so. And he leaves her at the gate to go get a key. He just leaves her alone in front of the Coney Island, like, amusement park. And she literally says, you're leaving me alone? He goes, you're never really alone. If that wasn't obvious by now. What?
Yeah, they're a bunch of predators.
Exactly. So they end up inside, and on the ride where it's like the swings that go up in the air, at the base of it are like wood panels, you know, like at the top of it. And one of them has the same image that had been on the book of the Memory Lane Retirement Community, a bear by a tree. And behind the panel is this winding staircase that leads to the retirement community. And Ryan knocks and then stops, like overacting, like being like, should we really do this type energy? And he turns to me, he's like, because God knows what's behind this door. She's like, are any of them scary? And he goes, worse. They're desperate. And they go in, and it's old sort of retirement community with like pink and white stripes. And on one door, behind one door, is like a cat watching the news. And they're watching MTV briefs from Kurt Loder. What year is this? What?
And who is it made for? What age of person was it made for?
And like, why doesn't that channel exist now that we can watch old news reports from Kurt Loder? And then we see this like blue-looking Gumby shaving, and there's a sunflower in a suit, and a green blob crying, and there's like a series of bubbles, and a violin playing itself wearing Converse. And there's an ice cube and a glass, and there's a dog in a cape and a mouse with a bow tie. And they're all sitting around like in a therapy session, and the sunflower that's wearing a suit says to the group, guys, we have to move through this narrative that our kids chose to forget about us. They all go through something that makes them forget. And then they like move on to an art class, and the teacher is the wooden form figure, but dressed in clothes.
Oh.
And he greets Ryan. They're like, we're trying to find somebody. And the teacher's like, wow, a human. And he's like, who's that? And And all of a sudden, Ryan Reynolds is like, no, stop. He's like, I need Lewis. And they head off because they're all obviously excited. Like, wow, a human can see us. This is going to be our only savior. And then this like weird if that's a black oval in a trench coat like attacks Ryan Reynolds and he throws him to the ground. And then he falls because there's an imaginary. He's like, who invents an imaginary invisible friend named Keith? It's like, whatever. And then they pass a pool and a banana's doing water aerobics and so is a gummy bear. And then Ryan heads behind 2 glass doors, this like beautiful atrium, into a garden. And we meet Lewis, a wise old bear. He's wearing a fedora and a white button down and suspenders and pants. Again, like 40s vibes. Of
course.
And he calls Bee Elizabeth. He's like, nice to meet you, Elizabeth. Like he knows her real name. And she's not like, how do you know my real name? She's like, hi. And Ryan Reynolds is like, she wants to help us with the placements. And apparently Lewis is 93 years old and he started the place. And Ryan Reynolds is like, he will teach you everything you need to know. And Lewis the Bear is voiced by Louis Gossett Jr. His final film role is voicing Lewis the Bear in the film If.
Oh.
And he says to her, did you know Ryan Reynolds used to be a clown? And she's like, what? And Lewis says, yes, his only job was to make you smile. And Ryan's like, not anymore. And he claps and walks away. And Lewis turns to Bee and says, why don't you give him the grand tour? I don't think you get it. This place can be whatever you want it to be. All you need to do is have a little imagination. And she smiles. And Ryan Reynolds is like, no, don't do this. And in that moment, Better Be Good to Me from Tina Turner starts to play. And the whole building begins to shift because now Bee is using her imagination. So the floor flips from carpet to tile and you hear the clicking as if like in an old train station of like the news, you know, like click, 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 click as like tile are overturning the carpeting. And a star flies through the wall. And walls are falling down, and there's like a bakery, and like wild vines grab Ryan Reynolds, and there's a dragon with fire, and a giant pool with synchronized swimmers that look like Blossom, and Blossom's in a giant rising clamshell, and Ryan falls into the pool, and he swims and swims, but comes out on the other side, which is clearly like an ocean, and he's walking out onto the beach, and he walks past a dinosaur wearing shorts, and he falls through a painting, so he's covered in paint and emerges into the painter's room with the form figure. It's like, what is happening?
What if you were one of those be a blob in a trench coat and you had like your room and your bed and all your little nightstand? It's all gone now?
Yeah, Bee just destroyed it with her quote imagination or her destruction. And he's covered in paint, and then he emerges with like a mullet and a guitar tie on stage with a, quote, Tina Turner that they don't show her face, a stand-in Tina Turner. And they start dancing, and then Bee leads the dance with the Ifs on stage. She goes up on stage, and she's wearing a tuxedo T-shirt, and she does a choreographed dance from Mandy Moore, not the Mandy Moore you're thinking. And it has elements of Thunderstruck from the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, where they're all in a line doing, like, rocket kicking. And I'm like, can we cut all this out? This is so not necessary, except for show like she's a kid again. Look at the whimsy. She's having fun. And the Ifs gather and they lift Ryan Reynolds up until he's thrown into a chair. Okay, back to normal. And they leave Coney Island. And I'm like, did they accomplish anything? Or did she just need to learn that she has an imagination? Like, what? Because doesn't she have an imagination if she can see the imaginary friends?
Right.
So now she's like, we're partners, she basically says to Ryan Reynolds. My predator, we're working together.
Stockholm Syndrome.
And he's like, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but let's see you tomorrow. So now Bee goes through her closet, grabbing some journals, ignoring or missing the giant purple box of paintings, allegedly 1 million paintings. And we see her at the hospital now with 2 bouquets of flowers and her journal, more like a sketchbook. And she leaves flowers and a dragon toy for Benjamin, and she refreshes her dad, Sexiest Man Alive, John Krasinski's flowers. By the way, he's still not in a hospital gown. He's in pants and a sweater reading a book. Shrug emoji.
Why is he even here? Just go home.
Get out.
Taking up a bed.
And he looks up and he says, how is your story coming? And she goes, oh, I don't have time for that. I got a job. And he goes, okay, I assume I'm not allowed to ask any questions. And she goes, nope. And he goes, as you were. And she walks out.
What? Your child could be in a gang. Ask some questions.
Yeah. She could be in an inappropriate relationship with Ryan Reynolds, who's luring her all the way over to Coney Island.
Right, and gave her a job to do.
Yeah, I'd be like, you got a job, not legal.
No.
So B tells Benjamin how she got a new job, and he's like, good luck, and you'll be great at it. And she's like, thanks. She goes, did you ever have an imaginary friend? He goes, no, I don't think so. She's like, do you want one? He's like, sure. She's like, okay. So now B is back in the retirement community where she's trying to match Benjamin with one of the ifs. So Louis the Bear, B, and Ryan are all interviewing all the ifs to see what would work. They discuss where they're from, their purpose, their fear of the dark. And like the gummy bear if farts. And Ryan says he can taste it with his eyes, which like Ryan Reynolds trying to be like, look at my Deadpool sense of humor, talking about how farts, I can taste them with my eyes. There's a marshmallow that's melting and one of his eyes like falls to the ground. They're like, don't look him in the eyes. And then Blue almost drinks the ice cube water. Because remember, he's a single ice cube inside a glass of water, like almost killing him. And it's just like going through all these random ifs, and she's drawing them and writing down fun facts about each one. And she interviews all the ifs and then brings them all to the hospital to try and match them to Benjamin. And she's like, are you ready? She says, and she unveils each if. And she's like, can you see this guy? Can you see this one? Can you see this one? And Benjamin can't see them. And she's all bummed out about it. And he says, look, it's okay. I can't see them, but I have you. Like, you're my human friend. She's all like, yeah, I guess.
Which is definitely more important for these children to have human friends.
Human friends. So she sits on the bench at Coney Island with Louis, the 93-year-old imaginary friend bear, which shouldn't they be ageless? I don't know. And trying to find new kids isn't working. And she says they're all looking for their old ones. And everyone needs an imaginary friend, especially when they grow up. And Louis says, nothing you love can ever be forgotten. You can always go back. Memories, they live right there in your heart. And he says it will come back. Like the ocean air, hearing the tapping on the boardwalk, close your eyes, it will all come back. And she sits there and she's thinking and she's feeling. And all of a sudden, this empty boardwalk is full of people. And she grabs Louis's hand, and now she's in a tiny white suit, again, like a white tuxedo shirt, with a pink bow tie. And they walk through Coney Island and the games, and she's using her imagination. And I'm like, is this plot? What is happening? And as she walks behind, we see like the stuffed bear version of Louis hanging on one of the stands. And we cut to Sexiest Man Alive, John Krasinski, watching the camcorder in his his hospital room. And they're watching the Coney Island rides. And it's like, how did he get the camcorder? Did she bring it to him? Can he leave the hospital? What's happening? And, you know, Tina from the Bear walks into the room, is like, okay, lights out. Tomorrow you have a big day. And he goes, for what? And she's like, stop it. And he's like, never. Like, we know you're a big kid at heart and you don't take things like heart surgery seriously. Shut up.
This woman's just trying to prep you for your open heart surgery, John Krasinski.
So stupid. So now back at home, B is having pizza with Fiona Shaw, and she asks her what she wanted to be when she was a kid. And we can see the view from the tables Manhattan, and it's like, wow, is that townhome? $37 million. Anyways, B asks her, what did you want to be when you were a kid? And she's like, a dancer. And she shows her this photo. She tells her how nervous she was, and she remembers hearing the wood and the piano and the light catching the dust, as she felt like it was a dream. She's like, what happened? She goes, I grew up. I was too tall. I was too awkward. I'm too old. But, you know, who wants to see an old woman dancing? And B is staring at the photo of her from her early days as a dancer. And guess who's in the corner of the photo? Blossom.
Ew.
Betty Boop.
No.
So B, of course, goes running upstairs and is like, Blossom, you're hers. You're my grandma's if. And she's like, duh, of course I am. And B's like, well, let's go. And they're like, no, we know. We've been trying forever. Blossom tells B how she watches TV with her and she reads with her and she spends time with her, but she doesn't remember. She can't see me. And B is so bummed, but she decides they have to help her remember. So B goes back downstairs, this time with Blossom, and she brushes the literal dust off the record player and puts on the classic ballet Spartacus.
She doesn't put on Swan Lake.
No, Swan Lake, exactly. I'm like, I've got the rights for Check's Notes, Spartacus. And then B and Blossom hide, and Fiona Shaw walks in and hears the music, and, they're peeking over watching. And she walks over to stop the record. She can't move the needle. She's so moved by the music of Spartacus. And all of a sudden, she starts to dance. She can't help herself. And Blossom starts to glow like embers. She dances with and in unison to Fiona Shaw. And Ryan Reynolds watches from the doorway, and he's shook to his core, but in a moving way, like, wow, B did it. So now B is on the case and working with the weird detective if to find the original kids of the ifs to put them together. So B is working on connecting Blue with his original if, who's now a grown man. And they're basically at Radio City Music Hall. And Ryan Reynolds is wearing his most old-timey outfit, a vest, his high-waisted pants. He's got a goddamn fedora on. Ryan, stop with your weird old-timey outfits in movies. / real life. We learned that Blue's kid is now an adult, played by Bobby Moynihan.
Oh.
And Blue is so pumped, and he's like incredible looking, and he realizes that he's hiding in the restroom because he's got this big presentation and he's scared. And Blue and Ryan won't go into the bathroom, so she pulls up her hoodie and she storms in there. And in walks Blue. And Bobby Moynihan is like building himself up in the mirror. He's like giving himself a pep talk. And Blue gets closer and closer as the guy, Bobby Moynihan, is literally like, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. Because he's like so nervous about this presentation. Blue sneezes, causing him to throw his coffee everywhere. The sink is literally partially ripped off of the wall. Coffee flies all over the mirror, but barely moves like it's some sort of poisonous sludge. And he doesn't see him. And so Blue is like so bummed out. And it's like, it didn't work. And then all of a sudden B is like, wait, don't lose him. And she takes off running. She returns with Blue and Ryan, and they're in the lobby of the building. And Blue sits right next to Bobby Moynihan. And of course, he doesn't see him. And then she opens a box and starts eating croissants. Because remember, Blue's happy place was croissants and coffee, and that this little boy grew up upstairs from a bakery. And she starts eating the croissant. And while she's eating it, Bobby Moynihan is watching her, and he starts breathing in and out like... And Blue starts to glow like embers. He's remembering. But the interaction is broken up by a woman being like, Bobby Moynihan, we're ready for your meeting. And Blue follows behind him, and he puts his hand on his shoulder. And Bobby immediately remembers, and they both glow. And Blue whispers, you're okay. And he walks in and crushes the meeting.
I feel like this is so upsetting for everyone else who's just watching him stare at the child eating croissants.
I know, and also like he's never triggered by anyone just eating a croissant.
People are having coffee at all his meetings, aren't they?
The excitement in Blue, though, they head back to the retirement community, and the ifs are overjoyed, like, you did it. Congratulations, Ryan Reynolds says, you did it. She's like, we did it. We make a good team. And he's like, we do, he says, looking at her. At home, Ryan and B dance. They're having the time of their lives. She gets to her apartment. Fiona Shaw immediately whisks her inside. And she's like, Grandma, I'm fine. Because Grandma's probably like, where have you been for days?
Yeah.
And she's like, it's not you. It's your father. I'm sure he's okay, but like, get whatever you need. We've got to get to the car. Fiona Shaw starts looking for her car keys, and B runs out the front door to Ryan Reynolds. I need your help. And he's like, hey, I'm here. Your adult man friend. And she's like, I can't do it again. He's like, you can't do what? She's like, say goodbye. And he gets down on one knee, and he's got his hand on his knee, and he goes, then don't. She's like, I don't know what to say, what to tell him. What do I do? And he goes, just tell him a story. And she's like, you're right. And she hugs him, and she's crying, and she goes, thank you. They head to the hospital, and as she's walking down the hallway, all of the ifs are there, and they're lining the hallway as she makes her way to her dad's room. And B rushes in, and it's Tina from The Bear, and she's like, it's okay, you're okay, everything's fine. He had a long day. He just needs rest. And it's like, is he dying or is he not?
When's his surgery?
Yeah, what happened? And finally, he's in a hospital gown. And it's not like a giant scar down his chest. He looks great. He's got full color. He doesn't look ill. He doesn't look like he just underwent heart surgery. And Tina from The Bear walks out, their sexiest man alive. And she sits down and she takes his hand and she says, hey, so I've been working on that story. I'm ready to tell you now. It's a story about a little girl that was so sad and so scared that she did everything to block the world out. And, she's starting to cry. She's like, God. She didn't want to feel again, but she couldn't. She couldn't because she has this person, this magical person. No matter how hard she tried to push away, no matter how hard she tried to grow up, he wouldn't let her. He kept holding on to her tighter and tighter. And the funny thing is that the only place that she truly feels safe is there. It is the only place she wants to be. So you can't go anywhere. I'm just a kid, she says as she sobs. Please, Daddy, sexiest man alive, John Krasinski, please. And then he whispers, that's a really good story. What happens next? And she gets up and she's like, Dad, I love you. And then she yells and screams, he's awake! And she runs out to her grandma and the nurses, but realizes the ifs in the hallway are all gone. The next day, she goes to the apartment of the ifs, but no one answers when she knocks. And the landlady appears and is like, oh, are you trying to get in there? And she's like, yeah, my friend lives in there. And she's like, no one lives in there. And she opens the door, and it's just an oversized storage room with random crap, but 2 chairs and the tea set. And she's like, huh. Meanwhile, her dad is now home from the hospital.
Oh.
Is it the same day? What? How much time has passed?
So he's good?
He's good, girl. Don't even worry about it. Heart surgery walked right out. So they fix his broken heart. And they're starting to collect their bags. They're packing up the car. They're leaving again because he's fine. Thanks, Grandma. We got to go. And she's flipping through the journals of the ifs that she drew. And she goes down to the packed car. And she sees the box of the, quote, paintings that her grandmother had saved. And the dad had packed it up. Even though it was tucked away in the closet, he was like, I better grab that box of paintings. And there's everything in the closet is like packed up. And they're getting ready to leave. And she puts something into the back of the car. And the box falls out of the car onto the street and explodes like a burrito into the street. Just stuff everywhere. She goes down, she starts pulling everything, and it's, random drawings and crafts and stuff. And there's a photo that we saw at the very beginning montage of her painting a picture of the family. Mom, Dad, her, and the Ferris wheel at Coney Island. And she realizes that the other part of the paper is folded. And when she unfolds it, it's a picture of Ryan Reynolds. And she realizes Ryan Reynolds was her imaginary friend the entire time. And she goes running up the stairs and she knocks one more time. And she's like, it was you. It was always you. She says, I'm so sorry. I didn't remember sooner. I'm just a girl standing in front of an imaginary friend asking him to love her. She doesn't say that, but it's giving that energy.
This tells me she did need more boundaries from her dad if her dream was a man who was like, please, can we follow the rules?
Yes! Like, what? She's like, you care, probably thinking I don't need you anymore, but I do need you, and I just had to come and tell you that I'll always need you, especially when I grow up. And she gets the picture, and she sets it on the floor, and she closes her eyes, and then all of a sudden it all comes rushing back, and she imagines him, and Ryan Reynolds appears as a goddamn clown with a top hat and a bow tie and a giant flower pin and white gloves and flower balloons. And he's standing there with all of the ifs, and they hug, and he glows like embers. And we cut to her walking outside to her dad and the car. And she's like, when I was little, I remember telling a story, and as I got older, I often find myself looking back, questioning certain details, but every time that happens, I always remind myself to take a breath and simply ask myself, what if? And Fiona Shaw watches as they drive away, and she says, she'll be fine. They'll be fine. We'll be fine. Shall we go inside? And she turns to her imaginary friend, Blossom, and they start going back inside. If title card, the end.
Oh, God. Why? Why?
It's so whack.
Why didn't they come save her mom?
Literally. And also, why is your imaginary friend hot as hell? You know what I mean? Like, in terms of like a kid, like, you don't know the concept of that.
Everybody else has a lump or a thing from the deep. Like,
yes. And you have like hot Ryan Reynolds, like some hot version of your dad or something. Gross. Stop trying to bang your dad.
Dresses like you. She's like, I want an imaginary friend in some suspenders.
I love old timey looks.
Yeah.
And a clown. It's like, yeah, of course you're going to remember him when you're older and trying to bang your imaginary friend. It's disgusting. And then after the title card, we get more of like Ryan Reynolds connecting the various ifs, truly whatever vibes. It's like Benjamin has a dragon friend. And then like once they get home, John Krasinski trips and falls and he's like, Keith. It's like, because his imaginary friend was invisible from like what would trip Ryan Reynolds. It's so whack.
You want to know why? Because he is so much the character in his own story, this imaginary character that John Krasinski is playing that I hate, this dad in maroon pants, needed, even as a child, he's like, I need an imaginary friend who won't take the focus off of me when I'm doing my dances. So Keith's invisible.
So insecure. Yeah, exactly. I'm a narcissist. It's deeply wild. And like, so because it's too much to even go through, it's like, Bradley Cooper was the ice, and Matt Damon was the flower in the suit, and Bill Hader was the banana, and Richard Jenkins was the art teacher, and Keegan-Michael Key was slime, and John Krasinski was the melting marshmallow, and Blake Lively was a part cat/octopus, and Christopher Maloney was the detective, and like Sam Rockwell was the guardian dog, and Maya Rudolph was out, and they all barely have a line. But they, he convinced everyone to be like, can you just say like this one line for me? It's so
save your
whack.
phone and your voice notes and just email it and I'll give it to the producer.
Awkwafina was the bubble. George Clooney was the spaceman. I mean, the cast is unreal. And then they even credited Brad Pitt as Keith, the invisible if, even though
who doesn't speak,
he doesn't even say lines. Yeah, and they're like, it's an inside joke because he did a cameo of Vanisher in Deadpool 2, co-starring Ryan Reynolds. Lol, 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 lol. It's like, no, don't you dare.
Stop trying to make Deadpool happen.
No one wants that.
Can't we have a single movie for Deadpool?
Apparently not. Stop.
I'm
anyways,
surprised.
guys,
this was the best possible way to experience this movie.
Truly, it's wild. So, guys, that's a movie that exists if, in honor of Sexiest Man Alive, John Krasinski, and Emily Higgins, my good friend who's host of Tasteless Podcast. Go check it out. We will be back on Monday, per usual. If you ever have thoughts, feelings, whatever vibes, you can always email me, allspoilerrecap@gmail.com. Subscribe, leave a review, blah, 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 blah. And Emily, thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you. This was great.
And everyone, we'll see you on Monday.